So it's the 11th of January and it's time for Something Found in the Beginning box set. But I've already taken it out because it's the Daleks, which has the introduction of the Daleks. A story written by Terry Nation and produced by Verity Lambert. Still, she was the producer for many stories to come. We have Christopher Berry and Richard Martin as directors, and these episodes, which were 7 episodes, aired between the 21st of December 1963 up until the 1st of February 1964. The DVD features commentary track on episode 2, 4 and 7, as well as a half-an-hour documentary called Creation of the Daleks, which basically tells you the creation of the Daleks. Besides that, there are the usual things, which are photo gallery and production subtitles. And also there's the leaflet inside here telling you about the story. So, I realized when I watched through yesterday's episode that I was not brief at all. So I'm gonna try to be more brief about each episode. And as you will read down here, the episode will say, for example, episode 5, even though it's part something. And that is because the episode numbering I will number from 1 up until, what is it, 696 or something in the classic era. So, let's start off with part 1 of the Daleks, the Dead Planet. The TARDIS crew has landed on the planet but has missed the high levels of radiation. They go out to explore to see they have landed in a forest, but something is wrong, because everything is dead and crumbles to dust upon touch. For example, leaves and flowers, they just crumble to dust. Eventually they reach a cliff and find out that there's a city below, but since it's getting late in the day, they decide to go back to the TARDIS. In the TARDIS, they decide to dematerialize instead of staying on that planet, but the TARDIS needs to refuel with mercury, so they need to stay and maybe visit the city next day then to see if they can find any mercury. The next day at the city, they decide to split up and look inside the city for a while and meet outside again in 10 minutes, but Barbara gets lost during this, and with her back pressed against the wall, something is approaching her. The Daleks episode 2, The Survivors. The Doctor, Ian and Susan enters the city to look for Barbara, but first they find a lab and not only find out that this planet has high levels of radiation which they have missed, but also that the Doctor lied about the mercury to be able to explore the city. They keep exploring a bit but gets captured by the Daleks, which also has Barbara. The Daleks interrogate the Doctor and find out that the crew has gotten radiation sickness, so they let one of them go to find the drugs. Well, that's anti-radiation drugs. And since Susan is the least unwell, she has to go. Susan heads through the forest to the TARDIS and is pursued by something but manages to get inside the TARDIS. She gets some anti-radiation drugs and she then again exits the TARDIS into the forest, frightened by a strike of lightning and thunder before going back outside. Episode 3 of the Daleks, which is called The Escape. Susan exits the TARDIS and meets the Thals, the other people on the planet Skaro. It's mentioned, by the way, that the planet is called Skaro in this first episode, just if anyone was wondering about that. So, they found out that the Thals, well, Susan at least found out that the Thals want cooperation with the Daleks, since they have anti-radiation drugs and maybe can help the Daleks by that, and the Daleks, if they have survived, maybe have some food for them in exchange. So, Susan gets a Thal cloak by the Thals, as well as some extra anti-radiation drugs, and goes back to the city. After helping her friends with the anti-radiation drugs to get them well after the radiation sickness, Susan talks to the Daleks about cooperation with the Thals and writes a note about peace for the Daleks. When the TARDIS crew gets better, they decide they need to escape, and the Doctor has realized that every floor in the Dalek city is made of metal, and maybe that powers the Daleks. So the Thal cloak that Susan got came to use, because they managed to trick a Dalek onto it, which essentially makes him lose connection, and Ian climbs inside the Dalek case and they try to make their escape. Let's see, what is it? Episode 4 of the Daleks, The Ambush. The TARDIS crew escapes in an elevator and manages to break it before the Daleks caught up to them. Meanwhile, the Thals have reached the Dalek city, but it's a trap and Ian goes to warn them. But before Ian manages to warn them in time, one of them are exterminated. So that's the first extermination in the history of Doctor Who. Back with the Thals, they find out the story about the Thals being a peace-loving race from now on, since they were sort of warriors back about 500 years ago when this entire nuclear radiation blast destroyed their planet. And we also find out that before the Daleks were in their metal case, they were called the Dolls. And basically the Thals have made a full recovery from the radiation during all of these centuries, but the Daleks haven't. So now it's time to leave Skaro, but unfortunately they can't, because Ian thought that they needed the Mercury, so he had the fluid link with him, and it's still in the Daleks city. Episode 5 of the Daleks, The Expedition. The TARDIS crew convince the war-free Thals to help them get the fluid link back from the Daleks. They make a plan to split up and have one team distracting on the main entrance side of the Dalek city, while the others will get there from the other side of the Dalek city, through the mountains. So a few Thals, Barbara and Ian, head into the forest to make the journey around and over the mountains, but they need to take a break during their journey, and one of them goes to fill up some water, but you can only hear his scream as the water turns into a enormous whirlpool, sucking him in. By the way, I didn't mention what the Daleks did in this episode. Well, basically what the Daleks did in episode 5 was that they realized that the anti-radiation drugs were fatal to them. Next up we have episode 6, The Ordeal. So the man at the whirlpool is now gone, and the crew needs to continue anyway. They manage at the water find a tunnel which might lead through the mountains, so they enter it. And from now on, I will call them the Tunnel Crew to make it easier. So, the colony crew, which is the Doctor and Susan and a few Thals, are planning a way into the city by destroying the surveillance that the Daleks have outside their city walls. They get there, manage to destroy one of them, but the Daleks manage to trace which one got destroyed and captures them. Yeah, so back in the city, the colony crew find out that, well, not really the colony crew, just Doctor and Susan find out that the Daleks plan to radiate the entire planet of Skaro with their nuclear reactors, because they need the radiation to survive, and the Thals need the air, but, well, they don't care. So, meanwhile, the tunnel crew has reached the gap and are about to jump across. To make it more safe, they tie ropes around the waist of one person on each side, and the other one jumps, and basically the other one uses the rope to hold against. Unfortunately, one of them doesn't manage to jump over the gap and is hanging on the rope down in the huge gap. Episode 5, The Rescue. Not to be confused with The Rescue, a later story, but we'll talk about that in season well, I think that's season 2. Yeah, it's season 2, so we'll talk about that then. So, The Rescue, the last episode of the Daleks. The Thal that is hanging on the rope sacrifices himself because the other end of the rope is tied around Ian, who is slowly getting dragged into the gap. The tunnel crew manages to get through to the city, where the Daleks are just seconds from succeeding, but Ian, Barbara and the Thals manages to get there just in time to stop them. they get the fluid link back and can travel again, so they say goodbye to the Thals. But as they dematerialize, the TARDIS shakes really hard and all of the TARDIS crew falls to the ground. So, that's it for the Daleks. And this is basically what we can thank for the success of Doctor Who. Because, well, I think, if I'm not wrong, there are on average like 10 million people were watching these episodes when they premiered, and when Another Earthly Child aired it was like 4 or maybe 6, somewhere there. So huge success with the Daleks. What do I think of the story? Well, it's really good for being a 7-parter, because I have a real trouble with the longer stories that are sort of way too long to be a 7-parter, but this one actually sort of manages to get through all those episodes with a lot happening. Like, for example, when I described Another Earthly Child, when I told you that the story was a bit slow. It's not that slow in this one. A lot of things happens each half an hour that they air. So, yeah. So I think it's a really, really good story, and I can understand why this might have gotten Doctor Who quite a success. So, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, I will have both started and finished watching The Edge of Destruction, which is the next story coming up, which is just a 2-parter. So, I'll see you then. Adios.